Thank you. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for attending our webinar today for localization of eCOA in global studies and challenges and solutions. As we mentioned before, eCOA encompasses patient-reported outcomes, clinician-reported outcomes, and either observer or rater collected outcomes. So this is a broad-based solution, and we want to cover all of the different translation processes that cover these solutions. Thank you. Next slide. So the goal for today is to identify localization considerations for implementing eCOA solutions in a clinical trial with respect to process, timelines, and circumstances for linguistic validation, as well as to increase awareness of best practices when migrating a paper translation to an electronic format or for when translating for an electronic device. Next slide. So first we're going to cover the standard localization process, then some localization considerations, localization timelines, and then the importance of linguistic validation, best practices, and then we'll have a Q&A at the end. Okay. Next slide, please. So for the standard localization process, what we're speaking to here is translating other items not going through linguistic validation. So for example, if we already have the validated translations of copyrighted questionnaires, we have that piece that will cover how to handle getting a new translation for that in a minute. But this piece is other types of screens, any of the ancillary screens, any types of in-house assessments or dosing, capturing dosing or anything like that, as well as quick reference guides and other ancillary documents that we're providing for subjects. Okay. Next slide, please. So when preparing for localization, first thing you want to do is obtain the English version of any of these assessments or instruments and any existing localized versions. This may mean requiring licensing the instruments from a developer or copyright holder, and that is usually handled by the sponsor. Sometimes Sphere of Health and or a translation provider like TransPerfect might be authorized or scoped to get that. So you would obtain the license from the instrument copyright holder or the developer, and then you contact the localization vendor in order to translate any new material. Okay. Next slide, please. So here are the steps that would occur. We want to make sure everybody's aware of the different steps in the process. So the eCOA vendor would submit the English screen report, which is a printout of all of the screens on a device with all of the instruments and any ancillary screens like the save screen or sending data or anything that is not a validated instrument. Then the localization provider will localize, or LSP would provide the localization. They would localize all of the documents using a text file for the screen report text. So any text that is on the screens in the device will be exported to a spreadsheet or a text file, and the LSP would then localize all of those phrases from English to the local language, and then would provide those back to us, which we would then import and create the localized screen report. Now keep in mind, certain languages take up longer or larger space on a screen than others. So for example, if you were starting with English and then translating into Hungarian, you need to allow for the appropriate spacing so that the Hungarian text would fit on the screen as well. We would generate those screen reports, send them back to the LSP to provide those. They would review them, make sure everything works in context and everything fitting appropriately, and they would provide all those documents to the sponsor. The sponsor that would then have a local affiliate review and provide any comments. Would send them back to the LSP to review those localized. They would review the localized screen reports with the comments, and then provide that information to us. They would review and make sure that those are accurate changes and that they're language appropriate and age appropriate, and provide those to us to implement the change, or the eCOA vendor. Then the localization vendor would provide that, all of that, including any final ancillary documents. So for example, if we're providing a quick reference guide to a subject with instructions on how to use the device, we would include the translated screen pictures as well as instructions next to those. All of that would be reviewed by the LSP, and we would finalize those documents, send those for certification, and then the certification will be provided to the sponsor.